The time has come for Africa to make a bold decision. For centuries, our continent has been a stage for others. Others have written our scripts and directed our actions. This era must end. We must now choose a path of complete severance from the external forces that have long dictated our destiny. This is not a call for isolation born of bitterness, but a necessary strategy for survival and the forging of an authentic, unadulterated African future. It is a call to turn inwards, to find our strength within our own borders, our own people, our own spirit, and our own undeniable potential. The journey to true independence is not merely political. It is economic. It is psychological. It is total. We have waved flags of freedom, yet we remain entangled in nets woven by others. These nets are made of debt, of dependency, of foreign systems that do not serve our people. To truly breathe free, Africa must cut these cords. No more looking to the Americas for validation. No more relying on Europe for guidance. No more depending on Asia for solutions that should spring from our own soil. This is the moment for Africa to declare its complete autonomy, not just in words, but in decisive, uncompromising action. Consider the implications of such a move. It is a declaration that Africa is no longer a field for exploitation. It is a statement that African minds and African hands are capable of building African futures. This severance is the ultimate act of decolonization. It is the clearing of space for African ideas to germinate, for African institutions to grow, for African solutions to flourish. The history of Africa's engagement with the Americas, Europe, and Asia is a long, painful narrative. It is a story predominantly written in the ink of exploitation. For centuries, our continent's most precious resource, its people, were stolen, shipped across vast oceans in chains, their labor building empires for others. This was not trade. It was theft on an unimaginable scale, leaving scars that bleed into the present day. The echoes of those chains still resonate in our communities, in our economies, and in the very fabric of our societies. We must acknowledge this brutal past, not to dwell in victimhood, but to understand the deep-seated patterns that continue to this very moment. Following the era of human trafficking came the scramble for Africa. European powers, armed with superior weaponry and a belief in their own supremacy, carved up our continent like a cake. They drew arbitrary lines on maps, lines that ignored ancient kingdoms, ethnic bonds, and natural geographies. These colonial masters did not come to develop Africa for Africans. They came to extract. The concept of perpetual dependency is a poisoned chalice offered to Africa under the guise of aid, partnership, and global integration. We are told that we need external expertise, external capital, external markets to survive and prosper. Yet this narrative conveniently ignores the fact that it is this very entanglement that has stifled our true potential for generations. Every loan comes with strings attached, often dictating policies that benefit the lender, not the borrower. Every aid package, while perhaps offering temporary relief, often deepens the cycle of reliance, preventing us from developing our own sustainable solutions to our own unique challenges. This is not partnership. It is a subtle continuation of control. Consider the impact on our sovereignty. When our national budgets are reliant on foreign donors, when our development plans must be approved by external bodies, where is our true independence? We become beholden to agendas that are not our own. We are forced to prioritize the demands of creditors over the needs of our people. This perpetual state of seeking approval and assistance erodes our dignity and our capacity for self-determination. It fosters a mindset of helplessness, a belief that we are incapable of managing our own affairs without outside intervention. This psychological impact is perhaps the most damaging aspect of continued dependency on the Americas, Europe, and Asia. The imperative for Africa is clear. We must construct our own systems from the very foundations. This is not about adapting foreign models. It is about creating institutions that are born from African soil, designed by African minds, and dedicated to serving African people. The current global financial architecture, dominated by institutions from the Americas and Europe, has consistently failed Africa. Their lending practices have often led to crippling debt, and their economic prescriptions have prioritized austerity over development. Therefore, the creation of truly African banks and financial institutions is paramount. These institutions must be capitalized by African wealth, governed by African priorities, and focused on funding African development, from grassroots enterprises to continental infrastructure projects. In the digital age, the control of currency is a significant aspect of sovereignty. We must move towards developing our own African digital currencies, or a unified digital currency, managed and regulated by an independent African monetary authority. This would reduce our reliance on foreign currencies like the dollar or the euro for trade and transactions, shielding us from external economic shocks and manipulations. A truly independent Africa must possess the capacity to secure its own needs and defend its own interests. This begins with the fundamental re-engineering of our supply chains. For generations, our economies have been oriented outwards, supplying raw materials to the Americas, Europe, and Asia, and in turn, importing finished goods. This has made us vulnerable to global price fluctuations and dependent on external goodwill. We must now prioritize the development of robust internal and intra-African supply chains. This means processing our raw materials here on the continent, manufacturing our own goods, and fostering trade between African nations. This will create jobs, build industries, and retain wealth within Africa. The foundation of any self-reliant society is its ability to feed its people. For Africa, this means a radical return to and elevation of sustainable agricultural practices rooted in centuries of African wisdom. For too long, our agricultural policies have been dictated by external markets, pushing our farmers towards monocultures of cash crops for export to the Americas, Europe, and Asia. This has often led to food insecurity at home, environmental degradation, and a loss of biodiversity. The most insidious form of colonization is that of the mind. For centuries, systems of education, media, and even religion imposed by external powers from the Americas, Europe, and Asia have sought to convince Africans that their own cultures, languages, knowledge systems, and capabilities were inferior. This psychological colonization has created deep-seated complexes, a lack of confidence in ourselves, and an almost reflexive tendency to look outside for validation and solutions. Therefore, the journey to true independence, the complete severance we seek, must involve a profound psychological decolonization. We must break these mental shackles and learn to see ourselves and the world through our own eyes. This process begins with a conscious effort to decolonize our education systems. We must rewrite our curricula to center African history, African philosophies, African innovations, and African perspectives. Our children must learn about the great civilizations of our continent, the scientific achievements of our ancestors, and the richness of our diverse cultures and languages. The conviction that Africa has all it needs to rise from within is not a mere slogan. It is a fundamental truth. Our continent is blessed with immense natural resources, yes, but more importantly, it is endowed with a vibrant, youthful population, rich cultural heritages, and a deep wellspring of ingenuity and resilience. For too long, the narrative has been that Africa is poor and needs saving. This narrative is a tool of control. The reality is that Africa's wealth has been systematically drained by external forces. The act of severing ties with the Americas, Europe, and Asia is an act of reclaiming that wealth, redirecting our energies inward, and placing our trust firmly in African hands and African minds. This trust must manifest in tangible ways. It means investing in our own people, in their education, their health, and their entrepreneurial spirit. It means creating an environment where African innovators, scientists, artists, and thinkers are nurtured and celebrated. The path towards Africa's complete severance from the Americas, Europe, and Asia is a path towards its very survival and its most authentic form of independence. It is a recognition that the current global structures are not designed for our upliftment, but have historically facilitated our exploitation. To continue within these structures is to accept a future of perpetual dependency and diluted sovereignty. The call for no contact, therefore, is a radical but necessary strategy for self-preservation, allowing Africa the uncontaminated space to heal, to rebuild, and to define its destiny on its own terms, drawing strength from its own core. This is not about isolating ourselves out of spite, but about incubating our own future, shielded from predatory interests. This journey demands an unprecedented level of unity among African nations and peoples. The colonial strategy was divide and rule. and its vestiges still linger in the artificial borders and induce suspicions that sometimes separate us. To achieve true self-sufficiency, we must transcend these divisions, fostering a Pan-African solidarity that prioritizes collective well-being over narrow national interests.